I met our next presenter about 2 years ago. I was at a Region 8 meeting, and I know we have some Region 8 folks here. And Region 8 invites not just community college folks, but folks from other segments. And so I met our next presenter, Dr. Marshall Thomas, who served in the U.S. Marines and is an educator at Long Beach State University. But what really piqued my interest was when I found out that he developed the VetNet Ally program at Long Beach State. And I'd heard about this program, so I took the opportunity to introduce myself and ask if I might get an invitation. And so when I got back to my office, I had a nice confirmation that I was going to be able to attend a VetNet Ally training session, which is developed at Long Beach State University to help faculty, staff, and administrators learn more about student veterans and their needs and to create a welcoming environment. So last year when we were talking about the Vet Summit and we needed somebody who could talk about military culture, I immediately thought of Marshall Thomas. And, but what I knew that he knew about student veterans and he knew about military culture and that he knew about the CSU system, but what really impressed me is how much he knew about the California community college system and some of the unique needs of our students. And so I think you're going to enjoy his presentation. Please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Marshall Thomas.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, welcome everyone. I really want to say thank you for you having me here again this year. I see a lot of faces of people that I know and a lot of new people here as well. So thank you for having me, and I really appreciate that this system is doing so much to help veterans. Today I'm going to talk about understanding military culture. Now, the reason that we need to do that is because we have to recognize that most of the people that work at a college or university have never served in the military. And the only thing that we really know about student veterans or about the veteran experience or military experience is what we see in the movies, right? And it's not all Saving Private Ryan or Born on the 4th of July or any of the other movies that you might think of. So we decided that we would develop a program, and we called it the VetNet Ally program. Before we get into it, I want to kind of give you a little bit of my background. As you can see from the photos, I was in the Marine Corps a long time ago, a very long time ago, back when hair was still growing from my head and I was in shape. I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I got out in 1992. Since then, I've gone on to get involved in education and get my doctorate, and part of my doctorate was developing this program. I want to introduce a couple of other people who are not here today, which I know is kind of odd to introduce people that aren't here, but I have two people that I really have to give credit for their assistance in developing this program. Patrick O'Rourke is a retired lieutenant colonel, and he was very instrumental in this program, as was Michael Barraza, who is a counselor, and he works now for the County of Los Angeles, working with kids in foster homes. They're not here today, but you're going to hear a lot of the stuff that they put into this presentation as well. So I want to give them some credit for that. Well, the VetNet Ally program was developed in 2010 to educate faculty and staff on college campuses about what it means to be a military veteran and the kind of issues that people face. Since then, it's been presented at all of these places. About, 12 or 13 different places. UC Irvine, Cal State LA, Cal State Dominguez Hills, a couple of private not-for-profit schools at National and Vanguard, and at national and regional conferences as well. Now, the great part about this is it's also been presented at our community colleges in Southern California as well, Citrus, Long Beach, and Santa Monica, where they've adopted the programs too. Now, the reason that there's a sticker up here is because that's a really important part of what we do. At the end of our 4-hour seminar, everyone that participates gets a sticker that looks like this to put up on their workspace in their office. Now, the reason that they do that is so when veterans are on campus, they see these stickers all over the place and realize, hey, this really is a welcoming campus. People here have taken the time to learn about me. And it's not a political statement. It's, people are not saying, oh, we're for a war or anything like that. They're saying we support the success of our student veterans on campus. All right, so what are we going to talk about? Well, we have about half an hour. Talk a little bit about veterans by the numbers. How many veterans are there? What are the things we need to be concerned about there? How does someone become a veteran? Why do we join? Talk a little bit about military culture. What happens when we get there? Challenges for student veterans. What happens when people get out of the service? And then I'm going to leave you with some thoughts about how to respond to veterans effectively. Well, the first thing I want to ask is, what makes a veteran? How do you become a veteran? Anybody? You serve in the military. It's really that simple, right? We do have 5 forces, armed forces. We have the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. Now, the Coast Guard is a little different than the other services because it's not under the Department of Defense. It's actually part of the Department of Homeland Security. But they still follow the same laws and rules of all the other services, and they have the same benefits as well. And during a time of conflict, they can be activated to become part of the Navy, too. Well, we do want to distinguish a little bit about veterans here, and that is that everybody who served and wore the uniform is a veteran, but we do have some folks that have served in combat, and we have other folks that have not. Now, for the purposes of benefits and things like that, there's really not a distinction between the two. But we do know that there's a difference in experience of these two groups of people. And those that have experienced combat have some things that they're going to internalize, that they're going to bring with them to our college campuses later, and we need to be aware of that. The other term that you'll hear used a lot is service member. A service member is someone who's currently serving, and that could mean they're on active duty, which means it's a 365 days a year, 24-hour-a-day job. They could also be on reserve duty. Now, I know when I was growing up, and until really about 10 years ago, I used to see all the TV commercials. Join the reserves, join the National Guard, serve 1 weekend a month, and then a couple of weeks during summer, right? Sounds great. Get educational benefits, some technical training, all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? There's a lot of those people that are in the reserves and National Guard who have spent a lot more time than 2 weeks in the summertime doing their service. Okay? They are the ones that are oftentimes being deployed into Iraq and Afghanistan as well. So their situation is a little bit different than it was 10 years ago. All right. Well, how many veterans do we have? Well, in California, we have about 2 million veterans. That's a bunch. Okay? More than any other state. Shouldn't really shock us. We have more people than any other state as well, right? And we can look at the different numbers and how many people served in each of the different conflicts, and notice that in World War II, or the World War II numbers are getting smaller. That's because the population of World War II vets is getting smaller as those folks pass on. We have 160-something female veterans, 1.8 million male veterans. Okay, we can talk about that a little bit because it's a very male-dominated thing, the military. All right, now I'm going to give you some numbers just from Cal State Long Beach because I think they're important. We have all these different portions of the GI Bill. We have 234 veterans right now that are actually receiving GI Bill benefits. And notice the number on the right, for dependents, we have 100 that are receiving GI Bill benefits. Now, the dependents are the ones that we kind of forget about sometimes, right? I mean, we have all of our veterans, but they have children, they have wives, and they're using benefits on our campuses as well. CalVet fee waiver, those of you that do work with financial aid and things like that or will know about that, we actually have more people on the CalVet fee waiver than we do using the GI Bill. CalVet fee waiver, for those who don't know, is a waiver of state fees for children of veterans who have a disability rating from the VA. Okay. Now, those numbers actually seem pretty small to me. We have, 234 veterans? That can't be right. Well, it's not. And the reason it's not is because that's just the ones that are using the benefits. We have another 250 that are not using benefits for a variety of reasons, but mostly because they've run out. Okay? They run out of benefits because they spend too long sometimes in the community college, or just because the GI Bill only gives 36 months worth of academic benefits. Well, how many people graduate in 36 academic months? Almost nobody. National average is what, 5.1 year, something like that? Okay, so that's something we need to think about. The other thing that is interesting about the small number is Cal State Long Beach is the number 1 or number 2 Cal State in terms of number of students. We have 35,000 students, but only about 500 veterans. Okay, well, what that means to me is there's a lot of veterans that aren't quite getting into Cal State Long Beach yet, and I know where they are, and so do you. They're in your schools. Okay? They're trying to get into ours. All right. Now, speaking of being in your schools, we did a survey of the people that got in spring last year. This pie chart shows how many different colleges our student veterans attended before they came to us. Only 22% only went to one, and 14% went to more than 4 different community colleges. That's a lot of transcripts for people to have to evaluate. Where are my transcript evaluators out here? Anybody? This doesn't sound like fun, does it? All right. Okay. Now, interestingly, education is such an important part of what we all do. We don't think about it in the military. And a lot of times people say, oh, people join the military because they can't make it into college. Well, the reality is that in the military today, 99% of the people that are there have at least a high school education. In the United States, it's only 86%, which shocks me every time I see this slide. I showed it to some students one day, and they weren't shocked. I just couldn't believe it. 86%. It means 14% of the people in the U.S. don't have a high school diploma. And we get into bachelor's degrees. There are more people in the U.S. than in the military who have a bachelor's degree, but that shouldn't really shock us, right? Because our veterans have chosen a different path. They've gone in the military first, and they go out to get their degree after they get out of the service. Things kind of even out in the military and the U.S. population at the advanced degree. Okay? You know, I've heard it said that the military is a young man's game. Well, I showed you it's 86% men, right? Well, it's young men generally, 18 to 25, 40%, 45% of the people in the military between 18 and 25. Things kind of taper off a little bit. Once you've been in for 10 years, now your next goal is, I just need to stay in until I hit 20 years so I can get a little bit of a pension, right? So that's why you kind of see those things taper off a little bit. Again, gender, 86% men, 14% women. Ethnicity, actually, people in the military kind of reflect the nation as a whole. The African American numbers and the Latino numbers are a little bit reversed, actually, in the military. There are more Hispanics or Latinos in the military and fewer African Americans. But generally speaking, typical of the country. Okay. All right. But then why are veterans any different than anybody else? Well, first off, they're non-traditional students, right? They are older. They're not 18 and coming right out of high school. They're more likely to have families of their own. Okay? Actually, marriage is something that's very common in the military. You get paid more when you're married. So a lot of times people do that. Plus, it's a very just traditional culture. Okay? There are some marriages of convenience for the pay as well. And you don't have to live on base in the barracks either. Less likely to have parental support. Many have traveled the world extensively. And of course, many have been in Afghanistan or Iraq. How many? Well, this is a snapshot, again, at Cal State Long Beach. Those that entered into our institution this semester, 87% have not been to Afghanistan. One tour, 11%. Two tours, 1%. But when we look at Iraq, things change a lot. Take a look at this. Well, 38% haven't been to Iraq, but the rest have been, and some of them have been more than once. Okay? That's important to know. All right. Now, that's a quick run through the numbers. I'm going to show a video here that I think will cause us all to pause for a moment. And that's what we do, right? We're here to help them. I think this is a good moment for me to also talk a little bit about the Zellerbach grant that the Chancellor just mentioned. There's some fantastic training. I encourage you all to go and see those segments of our training today and tomorrow. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this then. Given that we know that there can be some problems associated with serving in the military, why would anybody want to join? Okay? And think about it this way, too. We've been in the longest armed conflicts in our nation's history, and people are still volunteering. Isn't that an amazing statement about the people who do choose to join right now? I think so. Well, how many people are joining? Well, about 210,000 people a year. That's a lot of people nationwide. There are a lot of reasons that or that the military needs to put that many new people into the service. People get out. They spend 4 years of their contract time and then they leave, or maybe they retire after 20 years. And of course, unfortunately, we do have folks that don't come home. And we've lost around 6,000 people over the course of the last decade. Now, what you'll notice is that we do have reserves and National Guard here. But 210,000 sounds like a lot, but you know, just about 2 years ago, that number was 280,000. Now, what that tells us is that the military is downsizing right now. They're not recruiting as many people, and they're kind of pushing people out as well. All right, now we're going to play a little Jeopardy. If you've been in the military, you can't answer this. Actually, you could try. All right, now how does Jeopardy work? Jeopardy is, I give you the answer, you have to come up with the question, right? Okay, so here's our answer. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do the music for you. Okay? So here's our answer. The percentage of people who enlisted in the U.S. military from California in 2010. Say it again?
What is 1%?
He says, what is 1%? No. Someone else? There's a lot of people here, not a lot of voices. 80%? Ooh, that would be a lot. We're going to have to come down from there. I feel this is Price is Right now, right? Okay. 45. Too high. No, higher than 3%. Lower than 20%. Too low. Way back there. 11%. Very nice. What is 11%? So 11% of all the people that joined the U.S. military came from the state of California. Why is that important? Well, guess where they're coming back to when they get out of the service? Well, they're all coming back to California because they love their home state. Now, in addition to those 11% who joined from here, you have to look at all the people like me who grew up in some place like Oklahoma where we were bored and didn't really want to be there. And we joined the Marine Corps and said, can I live in Oklahoma City or can I live by the beach? I choose by the beach. So they're coming here as well. So we have a lot of folks that are returning. And the reality is they can't get into some of the universities right out of the service, so they're going to come to you. They're going to come to the community colleges. All right. Well, this is the other reason people join. Great posters, right? Okay. There are a lot of reasons why people join the service. What are some of those reasons? Family, okay? Economic reasons. Education. They want to serve. Why is everyone on this side answering and everyone over here is quiet? Thank you. They want to see the world. The uniform, absolutely. Get away from their families. Absolutely. Family tradition. Yeah, there's a lot of great reasons why people join. We can kind of push them down into these 7 reasons. Adventure. People want to go see the world. Patriotism, especially after 9/11. Familial tradition. You know, there are families that can trace a history of service all the way back to the Revolutionary War. Someone in each generation served in the military. Okay? A rite of passage. We really don't have a lot of rites of passage in America. Boot camp can provide one for you. Change of environment, the Oklahoma versus California thing. Career preparation, okay? Jobs are hard to find. And of course, almost all of the combinations of these reasons you can think of, but economic incentives is usually one of them in people's reasons. The benefits that people get, full health care coverage, all of that kind of stuff can be something that's very, very important in today's world. All right. So, you make the decision you're going to join the military. Well, what happens when you get there? Well, the first thing is you have to learn the culture. So, as a linguist, one of the most important parts of culture that I think of is language, right? So you go into the military, and now the whole language is different. Everything that you thought you could say, you cannot say anymore. So we're going to do a little quiz here. Now, for those of you that served, you cannot answer these questions. But let's take a look at these terms. What in the world is a bulkhead? Non-military folks. I'm on this side of the room for a reason, because you guys are too quiet. What's a bulkhead? Part of a ship. Yes, we're getting somewhere with that. But what part of a ship? What's that? The front? Not exactly. The little top part? No. But that's good. It's a head. It's on the top. It's a really big top part, right? Bulky. Okay. All right. Anybody? Anybody? Okay, this side of the room. Can you come up with it now? Door? No. Storage? No. Good. I heard it up here very quietly. Speak in the mic, sir. Wall. It's a wall. It's a wall. Now, if you served in the Army or the Air Force, what is a wall called? A wall, right? Exactly. But if you're in the Navy, the Marine Corps, or if you're in the Coast Guard, then you have to use naval terms, and those terms are really kind of attached to shipboard life. So that's a bulkhead. A porthole? It's a window, exactly, and not just the little round ones. All these things that are covered with curtains in the military or in the naval services would be portholes. What's a deck? Floor, ground, anything you can do a push-up on is a deck. You can't just go to lunch when you're in the military. You have to go have chow, right? You don't go on vacation. You go on leave. What's cover? It's a hat, right? There's something else, too. You've heard the term take cover, okay? You hide behind something if someone's shooting at you to protect yourself. That's taking cover. Okay, you can't just go to the bathroom. You have to make a head call if you're in the naval services, because a bathroom is called a head on a ship or a boat. You go to the latrine if you're in the Air Force or the Army. Now, what are colors? Flag, okay, but it's more than just a flag. This is one of my favorite terms because colors doesn't just mean the flag, it's also the ceremony of raising and lowering the flag that happens twice a day, okay? So the flag has to go up every morning, and it usually goes up at 8 o'clock. By usually, I mean every single day it goes up right at 8 o'clock, okay? But then it has to come down, too. What time does it come down? Sunset, okay? Now, how many of you can tell me what time the sun will actually set today here? 4:46? Is that really true? If so, you would be the first one to ever get it right on the money. We just don't care about that usually, right? But if you're on a military base, of course you care about that, because when that ceremony of the flag going up or coming back down is going on, you can't do anything at all except stand at the position of attention, face the flagpole, and salute until the music stops playing. And yes, music really does play over the PA system across the whole thing. So you want to know what time the flag is going to come down so you don't have to be standing outside when it happens, because it's you feel kind of silly standing in the middle of a parking lot facing the flag and saluting until the music stops. So people will kind of dive in towards the door when they hear the warning tones. It's always funny to watch. Now, obviously, this is just a very, very, very small section of military terminology. If you'd like to learn more, I can recommend a book for you. It's a dictionary of military terms. It's 768 pages long. Truly, 768 pages. And you can get it on Amazon if you really want. Though I heard last time I did this presentation, you can get it for free online too, so if you're interested, you have insomnia, this will take care of that for you. Okay, now, this is an important section here, and this is easy to mess up, so hopefully everyone will pay attention to this. This gentleman right here is in the Army, and he is called a soldier. This gentleman right here is in the Marine Corps, and he is called a Marine. Don't make the mistake of mixing up those terms. They don't like that much at all. The last thing an Army participant, a soldier, wants to be called is a Marine. And Marines spend 3 months in boot camp trying to earn that title. They definitely don't want to be called a soldier. This is a mistake you don't want to make. Okay? In the Navy, we call people sailors. What do we call people in the Air Force? Airmen, exactly. And in the Coast Guard? Everyone's like, I don't know. Squids? No. That's what Marines call sailors, right? And we don't want to say what the sailors call the Marines in return. We'll just leave that right where it is. Okay? Coast Guard. Say it again? Guardians, right? Think of that great movie with Ashton Kutcher. Yeah. It's a movie with Ashton Kutcher. Can you call it great? I don't know. Just kidding. It's a fine movie. So yes, they're called guardians. Actually, some still prefer the term coastie, which is what people were called for years and years that were in the Coast Guard. So that's the first thing I want to show you here. Now, I was at a presentation one time where they said, well, people don't even know what the different uniforms look like. Now, notice they're all in camouflage except the Coast Guard. And if you can tell from the photos, even the camouflage pattern is different for all of the different services. So you have probably seen people in the Army's camouflage uniform in your local community. The National Guard wears this as well, and you'll see them out and about. The only time you're going to see a Marine in camouflage is on TV, because they're not allowed to wear that camouflage uniform out into the civilian world. The Navy has a blue uniform, a blue camouflage uniform. I'm sorry, I think the only place that's going to work is if you fall off the ship, which is the last time you would want it to work. But that's very distinctive. The Air Force has their own kind of tiger stripe Vietnam-style camouflage. And then the Coast Guard typically doesn't wear a camouflage uniform. All right. Now, let's talk about kind of the way the services are broken down. The Army is definitely the largest of the services, about 38% of those in the military. The Navy and the Air Force are about the same size. You've probably seen the commercials, the few, the proud, the Marines. It's the smallest of the Department of Defense services at about 14%. And the Coast Guard is only about 3%, again, part of the Department of Homeland Security. And the rest of us in the military kind of, joke around about the Coast Guard. But let's be real, folks. They're the ones that go out when they should not be going out to save people on ships that are about to sink. Most famously, the Bounty that just sunk off the East Coast during the Hurricane Sandy. Okay, so some seriously hardcore people in the Coast Guard. I think guardian is a better term than coastie when you get right down to that. All right. Now, one of the most important parts of military culture is a very rigid chain of command. Now, this is actually the rank structure of the U.S. Army. We have left out there's a middle section that's called warrant officers. There are not too many of them. These are the primary ones. Now, on the left-hand side and kind of halfway down the center are the enlisted folks. And these are typically the people that join right out of high school. They're the privates, the corporals, sergeants, first sergeant, sergeant major. They're enlisted. The second half of that is the officers. They're the ones that have already received a degree and have gotten a commission. Now, the people on the left have to salute the people on the right, okay? And actually, if you're on the right, you have to salute the people that outrank you as well. Now, we don't really have anything like that on college campuses, right? I mean, can you imagine if you had to salute the dean as you were walking across campus? Jeff, how does that sound to you? Sounds pretty good, right? Mr. Chancellor, you can have everyone salute you. That'll work really nicely. Yeah, it would be good. So we don't really have something like that. The other thing that we don't have is people don't wear rank on them. So, how do you know if I'm on your campus dressed like this, I could be a student, I could be a visitor, I could be the chancellor. You just don't know, right? You don't know if what anybody's rank is on a college campus. Now, if you've just come out of the military, you're used to being able to see that on the people around you. You know where you stand in relationship to everyone else around you because they're wearing rank on their shoulders, okay? Now, the other thing about this is because the chain of command is so rigid, if you're a corporal and you ask your staff sergeant, so the E4, ask your E6 staff sergeant, for permission to do something, and the staff sergeant says, no, what does that mean? It means no. And the last thing that you're going to do is go ask the master sergeant or first sergeant the same question, right? Because if you do that, the staff sergeant will re-educate you later, right? You have a little period of one-on-one instruction, right? You won't do it again. Now, why is that important to us? Well, it's important to us because if you live in an environment where that is the case for a period of 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 years, you become very used to accepting the answer that you're given. So you've gotten out of the service and you go to the community college and you've applied for financial aid and you walk up to the financial aid window, you ask the clerk on the other side of the window for something and they say no. What does that mean to you? Well, to you it means no. But what does it really mean? It means maybe. It could be that that clerk doesn't have the authority to say yes. It could be that they don't know that they can say yes. It could be a lot of different things. What should you do? Well, if you're the student and you feel like the answer should have been yes, it is perfectly acceptable to ask to speak with a supervisor. Politely, right? Thank you very much for your help, but is there someone else that I could speak to? Yeah, try that in the military. It's not going to go very well. But we have to educate our student veterans to say, hey, listen, you might need to ask twice. You might need to ask someone else, okay? I even tell people when they call the VA, you know, it wouldn't hurt to call twice. Make sure you get the same answer both times. It's a lot of time to spend on hold, but you want to make sure that you're getting the right answer, okay? So we need to make sure that we educate our veterans about that. Okay, but how do you get into a culture like that? Okay. Well, here's another part of it. Customs and courtesies. The saluting thing, right? We have a Marine saluting the president getting off of Marine One, the helicopter. We have the airmen saluting, the sailors saluting, and we have a guard at the Tomb of the Unknowns. And the reason I have these photos here is because I want you to think a moment about the uniform. Someone mentioned earlier that people join because of the uniform, and that's absolutely true. This is one of the things that oftentimes veterans will say they miss, being able to put on a uniform. You know, when they get out, they say, oh, God, I'm so glad I get to pick what I wear every day. They throw all their uniforms away sometimes. But then a couple years later, they think, gosh, you know, that was actually kind of nice. I really miss wearing my dress blues. I miss being able to fit in my dress blues. It's totally different. But I think one of the reasons that people like the uniforms is not just because they look cool, it's because they carry a lot of history and tradition in them. The first part of the history that they carry is the person's history. You can tell a lot about somebody by looking at their uniforms. If we take a look at these airmen here, and the sailor as well, we have close enough shots that you can see that they're wearing ribbons, and they're wearing badges, and you can see the rank on their shoulder. You know, you can tell by that rank, you can tell how much the person makes, right? It's public knowledge. You can look at their ribbons and you can tell if they've been overseas, if they've served in a combat situation, if they've done so with distinction. You can tell if they've done their job really well, if they've acted appropriately in their service by getting a good conduct medal. Okay, you can tell all kinds of stuff. You can tell by the badges if they jump out of airplanes for a living, if they're on a submarine, if that's what they do. You can see all of that when you just look at someone. And when you take that off, no one can see that anymore. You know, we see our student veterans, we don't know what they did. Was this guy one of our SEAL Team 6 guys, you know, that have been so popular? Well, you have no idea when they're wearing a t-shirt and shorts to school, okay? So that's one part of history. The other part is the history of an entire service that they're wearing on their uniform. And I like to look at the dress blues of the Army and the dress blues of the Marine Corps, and because I think they really show a lot of the traditions very, very vividly. In fact, the color. Have you ever noticed when you see somebody in a dress blue uniform that the jacket's almost black, but the trousers are light blue? Have you ever wondered what the fashion police have to say about that? Or why would you do something like that? Why would they design a uniform when they don't they have enough material to do both in the same thing? Okay, well, it's for historical reasons. And, you know, I can describe the Army dress blues because it's really modeled after the old cavalry uniforms in the early U.S. history, where you had the cavalry riding out across the Great Plains of the U.S. It's hot, it's dusty, The jackets are not that comfortable, so of course they're going to take those off and put them in their saddlebags and go do what they do. Well, the coat's protected in the saddlebag, but the trousers are not. They're fading in the sunlight. They're fading because they're in the dirt and all that kind of stuff. So eventually they become a lighter color than the jacket. So we carry on that tradition by just making the uniforms look like that now. The same thing is true with the Marine Corps uniform. Those folks were on ship and they didn't wear the big heavy wool jackets with a big leather collar that's meant to protect them from saber blows. Okay? They're not going to wear that while they're just doing their daily routine on the ship. So for the same reason, they have the different colors. Now, interestingly, if you ever see a general wearing dress blues, their jacket and their pants are both the dark color. Why is that? Because they're not the ones that would have been doing all the work and riding out on the horses and all that. So that tradition too is carried on. They wear the darker colors. Okay. The other thing that people say they miss when they get out of the military is camaraderie. I have a few pictures I think that show that pretty well. The telephone pole says teamwork on it. Okay? Can't do that without teamwork. Combat, of course, is a place where you develop a strong bond with your comrades. I like the Blue Angels photo because I'm just trying to imagine myself flying 400 miles an hour, 18 inches away from another airplane flying 400 miles an hour. You got to have a lot of trust there, right? And then the photo in the lower left here is a color guard, a joint services color guard. And, you know, we joke amongst each other about Marines being better than soldiers and squid and jarhead and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, we all know that we're veterans and we're all on the same team, and that's why I really love this photo. I also love this photo. This photo became quite popular during Hurricane Sandy. This is the Army's 3rd Infantry Regiment guarding the Tomb of the Unknowns. Do you know that they have been guarding that tomb nonstop, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year since 1948? So when people were evacuating Washington, D.C. because of Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy, not these guys, they stood guard. That's the kind of people that are your veterans. Okay? They do what they have to do regardless of the situation. All right. Well, how do you get to this point? Well, everyone has to go to boot camp. It's an initial training. All the services have it. They're all different for the different needs of the service. They vary in length a little bit. Army, Navy, Air Force, 8 weeks of boot camp. The Marine Corps, 12 weeks of boot camp. And then 4 more when you're done with that. That's why people say Marines are crazy. I think maybe they are. But they're well trained, and those are the kind of people you want to be with, right? When it gets dangerous. So you tailor to the unique needs and character of the service. The self is replaced by the team. Okay? In the Marine Corps, the recruits that are in training don't even get to speak in the first person. They remove themselves that much. They say, this recruit requests permission to speak with drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Johnson. They can't say I or you or anything like that for those 3 months because it's really about being a team. So they remove that self. Okay? And as I mentioned earlier, in a society where we don't really have many rites of passage, boot camp can provide one. Well, speaking of boot camp, let's see just a little bit of boot camp.
This is Paris Island, Marine Corps Recruit Depot. The transition from civilian into Marine starts right here.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I'm Private First Class Line, Alpha Company, United States Marine Corps. Joined the Marine Corps because it's the #1 most respected branch of service. I've always wanted to do something with my life, and I've always set high goals.
Confidence and bearing is the key, you understand me?
Yes, sir.
When you join, you don't exactly know what's going to happen.
Yes, sir.
Onto the island, and everybody on the bus was scared, and Drill Sergeant came on the bus and was yelling at us to get off. We ran and got in the yellow footprints.
Now, what you're gonna do, you're gonna get out and get on my yellow footprints. You understand that? Yes, sir. Straight up. Yes, sir.
And I was shaking when I actually got here. I was nervous that I wouldn't make it, nervous that it would be too hard, but not nervous enough to where it would keep me from completing it.
Yes, sir.
The drill instructors push you to your limit because they show you what it's like to be in a combat environment.
Keep hitting with the elbows. Keep hitting with the elbows.
This morning is going to be the graduation ceremony for Alpha Company and November Company, 5 platoons of males. November Company has 2 female platoons. We'll all graduate together.
My name is Private First Class Haynes. I'm so happy and so excited. To become a United States Marine, honestly, is the best thing in the world. I can't imagine anything I could have done better.
When we say Marine Corps, it gives me chills because of what it means, because of the history behind the Marine Corps.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to Paris Island and this morning's graduation ceremony. I'd like to take the next few moments and talk to you about these young Marines standing before you today. They arrived on Paris Island over 12 weeks ago, blurry-eyed, scared, disoriented, yet eager to start recruit training.
When it comes to recruit training, of course it's hard, but where would you be if you stayed home?
The last 12 weeks have been one of the toughest in my life. Even though it was tough, what got me through was the motivation from my family and from my girlfriend to be proud that they can call me a Marine.
As you leave Paris Island today, understand the pride and honor of our Corps rests personally and squarely on your shoulders. Serve proudly and with distinction. You are our future. Ladies and gentlemen, I proudly present to you our nation's newest and finest United States Marines.
It's going to be a good feeling to leave, but you're going to miss the atmosphere, you're going to miss all the recruits. You get such strong bonds with the other Marines because you have to work as a team. Teamwork is essential in the Marine Corps.
That's what the sisterhood and the brotherhood is about. It's about respect, just like a family. It is a family.
Yes, it was the Marines because I got to choose. Couple of points to think about. That's the pretty side of boot camp. If you'd like to see the rest of it, you certainly can on YouTube. But I wanted you to see some of the themes that I was talking about there, and the fact that men and women both go through the same thing. All right. It's not all boot camp, though, folks. The reality is that it's a job with pay and benefits, sometimes better than what civilians make at the same education levels. Holidays and vacations, uniforms and physical fitness are part of life. It's an adventure, you could say. I think the Navy used to say it's not just a job, it's an adventure. Deployments into dangerous locations, travel around the globe, constant training. It's a duty with customs and courtesies, rigid hierarchy, leadership training and experience, camaraderie, and a sense of shared purpose. All things that people tend to miss once they get out, because they just don't have them in a community college. So getting out, you become a civilian, and to be honest with you, when you're in the military, people tend to look down on the civilians because they're not training, they're not performing duty, they don't have the same level of physical fitness. So now you're one of them. How do you become that civilian, right? What does it mean to be a citizen and a civilian? And people have to deal with that when they get out. Being a veteran, what does that mean? Well, for my generation, being a veteran was all the Vietnam guys, right? The ones that didn't seem to be adapted very well. You know, I didn't consider myself a veteran until really just a few years ago, even though I've been out of the service for 20 years, because being a veteran means something different to each generation. And our current generation, being a veteran is a positive thing, and we want to continue to make them feel that way. You have to become a student. You have to choose your own major. You have to select your own classes. You have to study. You have to question authority. Don't we ask people to do that all the time? No, that's not what people in the military, they don't question authority, but they have to here. And being a fellow student, which is hard to do when you're with a bunch of 18-year-olds who would rather be on Facebook and texting during the class when you're sitting in the back and you see it all. And of course, this is graduation in the military, and this is graduation from college. It looks a little different. It's our job, collectively, to make people move from what's on the left to move to what's here. Okay. So, and I realize I'm running out of time, and I apologize. I'll speed up a bit. You know, people are transitioning, excuse me, from the Department of Defense to a civilian career. We believe that our 3 sectors of higher education in California are the pathway. They're the bridge between these 2 things. But it can feel like this sometimes when you're on GI Bill and you're having to take the right classes at your school. We know that we need in higher education admissions counseling and outreach. We're doing that. Priority admissions, we need priority registration. The law has just changed to allow for that much more liberally, which is great. Healthcare support and referral. I thank the vet centers for being here today. Peer networking is important, so support having a student organization on your campus. And of course, employment assistance. You know, things can happen on a college campus. You know, having a drop, canceled, full, or closed class might just be an inconvenience for some of your traditional students. For a veteran, it means they don't get their housing allowance. That's a big deal. They're using it to live on. Controversial class topics come up. You know, you don't need to be talking about the war in Afghanistan in an art lab, but it happens, and we have to make sure that we're letting our faculty know that that's not necessarily the appropriate place to do that. Okay? Unit deployment happens. Okay? We need to be aware of that. If a student gets orders to deploy to Afghanistan, they have a few months that they have to get ready for that. So please be flexible with your students when they come in and tell you they're getting deployed. Now, it doesn't happen a lot on community college campuses, but on university campuses, anti-war demonstrations can definitely happen. And we encourage First Amendment rights, right? We want to see that kind of thing happen, but we need to let our veterans know if there's a demonstration going on somewhere on campus so they can take a different route to get to class that day if they feel uncomfortable. All right, some things to think about. When you're responding to veterans, be careful about thanking veterans. Now, this seems counterintuitive. Okay? But not everyone had a positive experience when they're in the military, and you thanking them for their service could bring up some bad memories for them. So it's always a good idea to kind of test the waters first. Someone tells you they were in the service, say, oh, that's great. How was it? How are you doing? If they say, oh, it's the best thing that ever happened to me, then a very positive thank you is in order. Okay? If they say, man, it was the worst thing that ever happened, you might want to rethink what you're going to say next. So just be aware that it could bring up bad memories. The other thing is, we say it so often these days that it's kind of become cliche. There was a good article, MSNBC, NBC News did an article very recently about saying thank you. And they said, you know, maybe it's better if you say, you know, you serving actually means a lot to me. Then when you say thank you, it's not just the same thing as you saying, hey, how's it going, right? Okay, important. Refrain from discussing the war unless course content dictates that you must, and approach the topic with sensitivity. It's not just veterans in your class, okay? I met someone on my campus the other day, not a veteran, had come to our POW MIA ceremony, appreciation ceremony, and she said, no, I didn't serve, but I'm a widow of someone who did. You know, we have children, we have wives that are in your classes too, so just be aware of that. Avoid putting a veteran on the spot about his or her experience. That's never appropriate. Veterans may complain about their non-veteran peers, especially if their classroom behavior is disrespectful, like I just mentioned. Veterans may not be used to thinking in gray. Campus doesn't have a hierarchical structure. Okay? They're used to, hey, what do I have to do to get this done? If you're a professor and you assign group work, man, your veterans may really hate that. It's not that they're not used to working in groups. They've done that their whole military career. What they're not used to is taking weeks and weeks and weeks to talk about what may or may not happen with this report that you might do this and you might do that. They just want to get it done. I had an upset veteran call me just yesterday saying, I am so sick of this group and the professor won't do anything about it, and I've been talking to the group about doing stuff for weeks, and then they had a meeting and didn't tell me about it. And I'm really angry now because I've been trying and they haven't done it. So be aware of that. If it seems like a veteran is having a problem, folks, they might be. So ask them how they're doing, okay? If you are a professional who is trained to help them, do so. If you're not, get them in touch with the people that can. And number one, we should not have to say this, but we have to. Never ask this question. People do it all the time, and it's always inappropriate. Okay. What happens when we reduce our military forces? Well, we've seen it happen before. Post-World War II, what happened was we had millions of guys coming back, mostly guys, women too, but mostly men, coming back from the war, and we had the GI Bill to help them all get into higher education, and it changed the face of higher education forever, okay? They went on to create a fantastic nation. We saw it happen after Desert Storm. We reduced our forces about 30%. The same thing is happening right now. We're reducing our forces dramatically, and our students are coming back. The difference between Desert Storm and now is we have a lot of people that have had a lot of combat experience, and they're going to be in our schools, and they're bringing those experiences with them in their spirit and in their minds. All right. As we kind of wrap things down a little bit, I hope you will all go forth and be allies to our student veterans. The fact that you're here suggests that that's exactly what you're doing. But we want to do these things. We want to support the academic freedom, the professional, personal, and social success of our service members and veterans. Provide them support, information, and assistance. Respect their right to privacy and confidentiality. What they say to you should stay with you unless it is them telling you that they're a danger to themselves or others, in which case you want to get help. Create a welcome environment for service members and veterans at your institution so that they can be successful. And with that, I thank you all so much for being here today.